#left at the altar by a duke. 7 years later, he shows up at her door, begging. The rain fell in sheets against the stone steps of Ashford Manor as Lady Eleanor Hartwig stood before the massive oak doors she had sworn never to see again. Her hands trembled beneath her travelling cloak, though she could not say whether it was from the cold or from something far deeper. 7 years had passed since she last stood on this ground. 7 years since the worst morning of her life had begun in the chapel just beyond those doors. The door opened. A young servant girl appeared, wide-eyed, curtsied quickly, and stepped aside without a word. Eleanor walked into the grand entrance hall, and the memories struck her like waves against a cliff face. She remembered these same corridors filled with light and music. She remembered flowers braided through her hair, guests filling every room, laughter echoing off the vaulted ceilings. She remembered standing alone in her wedding gown, while whispers spread through the chapel like smoke. He never came. Duke William Ashford had left her at the altar. No explanation, no apology, no farewell. One moment she was a bride, waiting to begin her life, and the next she was a spectacle. The entire county watching her humiliation in real time. Her father died 6 months later. The doctors called it illness. Everyone else called it heartbreak. Eleanor had taken what remained of her inheritance and vanished to the northern countryside, where no one knew her name or her story. She had buried the girl she'd been and built someone new from the wreckage. Someone harder. Someone who would never again give anyone the power to destroy her. Before the story continues, if you love stories about resilience, second chances, and love that refuses to die, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who needs it. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. Now the butler appeared at the end of the hall. Thomas. His face was older, more lined, but his eyes were kind. The same eyes that had treated her gently during her brief engagement to William all those years ago. Lady Eleanor, he said, with a bow that seemed to carry weight. His Grace is waiting in the library. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to turn around, walk back into the rain, and ride home to her quiet northern life, where William Ashford was nothing but a scar she'd learned to live with. But the letter in her pocket anchored her. Written in his own hand. Delivered 3 days ago by a rider who had travelled through the night to find her. She followed Thomas through corridors that felt both familiar and foreign. The paintings on the walls seemed darker. The carpets were threadbare. The whole manor felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Thomas opened the library door, and there he was. William stood by the window, his back to her. For one terrible suspended moment, time collapsed. The same broad shoulders, the same dark hair falling just past his collar. But when he turned, she saw that everything had changed. His face was thinner, carved with lines that hadn't been there 7 years ago. He looked like a man who had been drowning, slowly, for a very long time, and had only just managed to keep his mouth above the surface. Eleanor. Her name on his lips made every carefully constructed wall inside her shudder. She lifted her chin. Your Grace. Your letter claimed this was a matter of life and death. That is the only reason I am standing here. Something crossed his face. Pain, perhaps, or shame. He gestured to a chair. She remained standing. She would not sit in his home as though they were old friends sharing tea. Thank you for coming, he said. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. You have less than no right. I know. You destroyed my life, my reputation, my family. If your letter had not mentioned innocent people in danger, I would have burned it without reading past your name." He flinched, nodded, accepted it. "The estate is failing," he said. "The tenant farms are dying. A blight has been spreading through the crops for 2 years. Livestock are perishing. 3 families have already left. More will follow before winter. Children are going hungry." Eleanor felt concern stir beneath her anger, despite herself. She had grown up in this county. Those tenant families had been her neighbours, her friends, the people who had waved to her from their fields when she was a girl riding through the countryside.
"What does this have to do with me?" "Your work." He met her eyes. "Your research in agricultural reform. The papers you published under a false name. Crop rotation, soil restoration, water management. You saved 3 estates from ruin in 5 years. You are the most brilliant land scientist in England, and I am not the only person who knows it." She stiffened. "How did you know it was me?" "Because I know your mind, Eleanor. I know how you see problems others miss. I recognized your thinking in the very first paper you published, and I have read every word you've written since. You have no right to claim you know me. You left me standing in a church in front of everyone I loved. I know what I did. Then why should I help you? I am not asking you to help me. I am begging you to help them." Eleanor walked to the window and looked out at the grounds stretching toward the tenant farms. The fields that should have been green and lush were patchy, yellowed, dying. She could see the blight from here, spreading across the land like a sickness that no one had been able to stop. She turned back to him. "If I agree, I do this for the tenants, not for you. I will have full authority over every decision regarding the land, the crops, and the water. You will not question my methods, and when this is finished, I leave, and you never contact me again. Whatever you need, whatever you want. Show me to my room. I want to be alone." She spent 3 weeks on that estate, and every day cracked her open a little wider. She rode out at dawn each morning to inspect the fields, test the soil, and interview the tenant families. What she found was worse than William had described. The soil was exhausted, stripped of nutrients by years of planting the same crops without rotation. But that wasn't the worst of it. She traced the water sources upstream and discovered a massive waste pit on the northern hillside, positioned directly above the streams that fed every farm on the property. Every rainfall washed poison into the water the tenants drank and the fields absorbed. "You've been killing your own land," she told William, her voice flat with anger. "This waste system has been contaminating everything for years." His face went white. "My father built that system decades ago. I never thought to question it." "You are responsible for these people. How could you not know?" "Because I have been barely holding on," he said, and his voice was raw in a way she had never heard before. "Because after I left you at that altar, everything in my life fell apart. I have been drowning ever since. I know that is no excuse. I know I have failed everyone, but I am trying to make it right." She wanted to stay furious, but something in his voice, something broken and honest, made her pause. And then the question she had carried for 7 years came out before she could stop it. "Why did you leave me?" He told her. The morning of their wedding, he had received a letter. His younger sister Charlotte had been kidnapped. The letter demanded he abandon the ceremony immediately, come alone, tell no one, or Charlotte would be killed. "I spent 3 weeks tracking the men who took her," William said. "I paid a ransom that nearly bankrupted the estate. By the time I brought her home safely, you were gone. Your father refused to see me. Every letter I sent came back unopened. Why didn't you tell me this? Why did you let me believe you simply didn't want me? Because the men who took Charlotte were never caught. I received another threat. If I ever revealed what happened, they would return. I was terrified that connecting you to me would put you in danger. His voice cracked. I thought your hatred was safer than your life being at risk. I thought I was protecting you. I know now that I was a coward who made the worst choice of his life. The ground shifted beneath Eleanor's feet. 7 years of grief, anger, and carefully constructed armor, all built on a foundation she had believed was solid. And now that foundation was crumbling. "You made that choice for me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You decided what I could handle. You let me suffer based on a lie. I know. I have regretted it every single day." She turned away because looking at his face was unbearable. She needed time to think, to process, to feel something other than this overwhelming collision of fury and grief, and something else she did not want to name. "There's more," William said quietly. 2 weeks ago, I received another letter from the same people. They've been behind the blight, sabotaging the estate deliberately for years. Revenge against my father for a business partnership that ended badly. A man named Gerald Blackwood. He wants to destroy everything the Ashford name has built. They set a trap. Eleanor spread word through the county that the estate was recovering. A miracle cure for the dying land. She knew that if someone was deliberately poisoning the farms, they would not let the recovery stand. She was right. On a cold night 3 weeks later, she caught a young man pouring something into the livestock water. He was barely more than a boy, terrified, shaking, forced into it by threats against his mother. William tackled him before he could flee into the darkness. The boy confessed everything. He gave them Blackwood's name, his location, his plan. William rode out that night with Eleanor beside him, because she refused to let him face it alone, and they confronted the bitter old man in a shabby house on the outskirts of the neighboring county. "Your father took everything from me," Blackwood spat. "He deserved to watch his legacy crumble." "Those tenant families did nothing to you," William said quietly. "Those children going hungry did nothing to you. You punished innocent people for a grudge that had nothing to do with them." The magistrate arrived and took Blackwood into custody. The boy's testimony and the evidence ensured he would answer for what he'd done. It was over. As they rode back toward the manor in the first light of dawn, Eleanor felt the exhaustion settle deep into her bones. But beneath it was something else. Relief, clarity, and the unmistakable sensation of walls coming down inside her that she had spent 7 years building. When they reached the manor, William helped her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist. She did not pull away. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. For coming when I asked. For saving these families. For being braver than I deserved. I spent 7 years hating you," she said. 7 years building walls so I would never hurt like that again. But these weeks, working beside you, seeing who you really are, those walls have started crumbling. And I'm not sure I want to rebuild them. He reached up and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "I never stopped loving you, Eleanor. You were the reason I kept fighting to save this place, because I knew that if I lost everything completely, I would never even have the smallest chance of seeing you again." "I never stopped loving you either," she whispered. "I tried. but my heart wouldn't listen. "Is there any chance," he asked, his voice barely steady, "that we could begin again? Not pretend the past didn't happen, but learn from it and build something new." She thought about everything: the pain, the betrayal, the years of loneliness. But she also thought about the man she had rediscovered, the man who worked until his hands bled alongside his tenants, the man who had sacrificed everything to save his sister, the man whose eyes still looked at her as though she were the most extraordinary thing in the world. "Yes," she said, "but I have conditions. No more secrets. We face everything together. And you make me a full partner in managing this estate, because I have more than proven I know what I'm doing." He laughed, the first real, unguarded laugh she had heard from him in 7 years, and pulled her into his arms. "Done. All of it. I will spend the rest of my life earning your trust back." 6 months later, they were married in the same chapel where Eleanor had once stood alone. But this time, William was there, waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes and a love on his face that 7 years of silence had not been able to extinguish. The tenant families filled the pews. The fields beyond the windows were green again. The animals were healthy. The estate was saved. And so were 2 hearts that had nearly given up on each other. As they walked out of the chapel together into the afternoon sun, Eleanor understood something she hadn't before. The most beautiful love stories are not the ones that unfold without struggle. They are the ones that break and bend and nearly shatter, and then are rebuilt, carefully, honestly, and together, into something far stronger than they ever were before. She looked at William and saw her future. Hard work and partnership, and a love that had survived the worst thing either of them could imagine. She had come to Ashford Manor expecting to face her worst nightmare. Instead, she had found her way home.